So I found this piece of wood while walking on a trail with my wife, and I was looking for a future project to do, and I thought this would be a good piece of wood. What grabbed me about this wood was the color and the shape. On one side of it has the deep veins going through it, and the color of the wood. Some of it had bark, and others it was just natural. A little bit of hardwood and a little bit of rotting wood. And as you can see, as I flip it around here, that was probably the side that grabbed my attention, was the roots, because in my mind's eye, the lamp that I wanted to do would have the resin going through it. So that's why I picked it up. It is a little bit bigger than I hoped for. Should have grabbed, but I used it anyway. Here I'm enjoying the outdoors with a toothbrush. I am just going over every inch of the wood, just trying to get rid of any loose bark, dirt. Sometimes there were a couple like little bugs in there, some ants, whatever. And as you look at the table, you'll see it starts to build up with a lot of loose stuff that came from the wood. And that's pretty much what I'm doing here, just going through, trying to get rid of any soft debris, getting a good look at it, and checking it over, just trying to think a couple steps ahead of time, trying to see what it is that I wanted to do, what side I was going to use as the front and the back of my project, and just make sure there's no bugs, anything loose, get rid of it. And again, like I said, if you look at the table, you'll see just how much stuff comes off this wood. And even when it was cleaned, stuff was still falling off and sticking to the brush when I was coating it. You'll see that in a little bit. So that's pretty much what I'm doing here. Getting rid of all the loose stuff we don't need. And you can also see how light the wood had gotten. All the dirt and stuff coming out of the wood. It's gotten lighter than it was when I first did it. Here you can see why I took the extra step to get rid of the loose wood with the toothbrush. Was when I got to this process, I'm just covering all the wood with the resin, trying to get it to soak into the wood so that when I put my mold on here and pour my first bit of resin, that I won't lose too much of it soaking into the wood. I've already protected the wood the best I could from absorbing too much of the resin when I pour it in the mold. And I'm just going through it all, and you can see how dark the wood had gotten now that I've stained it with this resin. It still looks good. I'm not too concerned about it. The thing I don't show in this video is how I mixed and heated up my resin. It really wasn't that much of that kind of a video. It was more of this process of how I made the lamp. And again, you can tell the difference between the lighter wood and the darker wood, and it looks wet now, and when it dries it looks just as wet. So I really did like that look on this lamp. And as you keep an eye on it throughout the video, you'll see how this wood gets it starts to change color again later on. And here's some pictures of it dry, and again you can see how it looks kind of shiny and glossy and dark. It's actually dried right here. I have it in the house. And here is the mold, self-made mold, duct tape and some cardboard. Trying to make it the best I can. Here's the top view. I've already drilled out the hole, which was filled, and you'll see along the sides of the mold, looking from the top view, all the space that's there that's going to run down on the outside of the wood, which was the effect I was going for. I just didn't realize how much resin this project was going to take. Here I am mixing the resin. I have the water to the right is hot, and I did warm up my resin first to make it as thin as possible. And I did have a camera, another GoPro camera where the light is, but my hand was in it too much, so I didn't really get a lot of good video. So here I am, after I've poured the resin. I had a lighter and just kind of popping the bubbles, and you can see how far down the resin has sunk and dropped down, and I knew it was going to do that. I just didn't know how much resin I needed for it, so I just kind of did smaller pours. And here I am, just adding a little bit of plastic plants. I didn't know if they were going to melt or if the glue was going to let go. So one of the things I had done was stuck it on there with glue and then just taken some resin and just brushed it on to protect it, so that hopefully when I did my next pour, the glue wouldn't melt and release and have my plastic plants float to the surface. Here I am, just double checking everything, just kind of making sure, maybe just checking to see how much bubbles were starting to come to the surface of the first pour, trying to see how much resin I would need to get down in the gaps. And here's an overshot view, and again, like I said, once I start working, my right hand is in the view, so I don't get too many good shots of the other camera that I was hoping for. So at this stage, I've already done a couple pours, and just before it sets, I'm just blowing the bubbles using a straw and using a light to get a really good look, and trying to pop the bubbles on the side of the mold. I'm not too worried about the center of the mold. Those come up pretty quickly, but those little bubbles, they hug the mold and they grab on there pretty good. Here's a cool shot, overhead shot of just how slow I pour the resin into the mold, because I don't want to create too many bubbles, and I definitely don't want to create more than I need. So I pour it very slowly on a popsicle stick on an angle and just let it go down. And like usual, after every pour, you got to go through and pop bubbles and double check everything and see if there's any issues that you can fix before it sets and cures. Here's a better look, overhead shot of how slow I pour the resin. You can see the resin slowly starting to fill up on the wood, and then it kind of creeps down between the mold and the side of the wood, and that's the effect that I was going for. Like I said earlier, just didn't realize how much resin I would need for this project, but I did learn a lot for future projects. And this big popsicle stick that's laying across, I have a custom lure that I had made, glued to a piece of dowel that's glued to the popsicle stick to hold it into place until I fill up the resin. Once the resin reaches the bottom of the lure and it sets enough to hold onto it, then I will take the popsicle stick off and then just continue my pour and popping bubbles from there. And as I do different pours in each pour, later on in the video, I don't know how well you'll see it, but you'll see that there's little lines going through the lamp. It's because each pour that I do, you'll see where one pour stopped and dried before I add into the next. If I was to do a project like this again, I would probably just mix a big batch and just try to do a full pour. But because this was just an experiment, I knew that there was going to be some issues, so I was okay with that. Besides popping bubbles with the straw, I can use a propane torch or butane torch to get most of it out. It was a little too hot. It was starting to melt some of the plastic plants, so I also used some of the fire lighter. And now it's time to open up the molds. That mold process opening up was a lot quicker than it looked. Here is the rotary tool that I do. I'm kind of glad I did this outside on a nice day. You can see how thick that resin had gone between the wood and the mold when it dripped down, which I knew it was going to. I just didn't think it'd be that much of a big step. So with the Dremel tool, what I'm doing here is I'm just slowly starting to shape how I want it to look and getting rid of the big step or the excess resin off the bottom of the lamp. And if you watch this process, it is a little bit of a longer clip, but I wanted to slow it down for a couple of reasons. One was to show you just how slow or the real time of the process of what it takes. and I have to do both sides and the end, everything but the top of this lure like this. And if you watch the whole process, you'll start to see just how the lamp slowly starts to take on its own shape. And it looks like I'm really going deep here. I am not. I'm just barely touching the resin in the wood, and it's creating a lot of dust. And I think watching this video, I'm looking at it going, man, I didn't think I did that much sanding. But this stuff is it's like fiberglass when you start sanding it. It's so light, it goes everywhere. You can even see the driveway starting to turn white in areas because it was a little bit of a windy day. So, and again, I'm just trying to go through getting that big clump of resin out of the way, working on some of the imperfections of pouring the mold. There were some tape that was still stuck to the mold and stuff like that. So I'm sanding through the stuff that I don't want, which was good because I was going to go that deep anyway. And then here I'm just going down the wood where those little veins were in the wood, where the resin has gone down. I'm not sanding it too much, I'm just scuffing it just to get some of those little air bubbles, and sometimes you get little dirt and stuff that I tried to get off with the toothbrush. Still sinks in there. And looking at the video here, you can see how the lamp is actually starting to take more shape of it now. It's starting to come a little more smoother and a little bit of an easier flow from the transition of the resin going down the lamp and to the square brick of resin. And then I'm just going to slowly work my way to the one side and do the other side. Shape it and do everything else. So it was a fun process. Enjoyed the day. But yeah, it was hell to clean up, I'll tell you. As you can see, I just didn't want too much of a hard edge, so I thought I'd shave them down just a little bit, and I'll sand them with the sander when I do everything else. Alright, a little while later, I was able to go around this whole piece of wood and sand everything the way I kind of wanted it. And now it's just a matter of going to sand everything and get it all smoothened out. You gotta love slow-mo. Enjoying my day outside using some wet sandpaper. Starting off at about 420, 430 grit sandpaper. Working my way up to 8,000 grit sandpaper. It's dry or wet sandpaper. I use the wet. The project didn't mind the water. The sander, I don't know if it was probably a good idea, but I did it anyway. I had to sand the whole thing, everything except for the very top of the resin. So between each sanding, each grit sandpaper, I had to wet it, wipe it down, and start each process over. It took me a good part of maybe 2 days. I did it the first day, and then the second day I thought, you know what, I'm just going to do it again. I was rushing some of the process, so I just went and did it again and did it right. And then you can start seeing how clear it actually starting to turn out. That's the top of it, and then you'll see how it slowly starts getting frosty, but a little bit clearer after each sanding. And then by the time we get to the polishing steps, it's going to really pop and shine then. Alright, I'm back at my workstation in the house now. I bought these 3-inch polishing discs on Amazon. I think you get 6 little wheels. It comes with the 2 attachments. Man, they saved me a lot of hand sanding and polishing and stuff. So it turned out really well. I'm happy and very pleased with them. So again, I had to pretty much wax and buff the whole lamp just because of all those little resin veins that were running through. Some of the lamp did chew up the foam on my polishing pads, but it wasn't a real big issue. I had some extra ones left over. And again, you got to do all the sides, even the top. And the teak oil, stuff's expensive, holy moly. So here I am doing the teak oil. There's not that much of an odor to this, so it's not bad. It did take some time for it to soak in, and I had to do it a couple times. I'm not doing the main part of the lamp, the resin. I'm just doing the veins and the wood because it did soak in. And again, you can see how the wood got dark again. So I'm just going around touching it all up. I did 2 coats, I believe. Yeah, I think I did 2 coats. And you can see that resin is looking really shiny from that polishing. So I was very happy with that polish and the process. And here are some pictures of the finished project. And a little time lapse of small stuff that I didn't want to spend too much time on. And that is it. I will do a project like this down the road, but not this big. It's just too much cost in resin. I would have liked to have gone a little higher in resin. Made the lure look like it was more in the middle, but I was happy with the resin and the lamp, and I did enough to get a better idea on what I want to do for my next project. And here's the lamp being turned on and off in the dark. You can get different lights and have them different change colors and stuff. This was just a simple little light to test out if I liked it. So if you made it this far into the video, thanks for watching. Cheers!